A young woman was driving alone through the desert, hours from home and miles away from the nearest town. The sun was sinking fast, painting the horizon in burnt orange and deep purple. The long, empty highway seemed to stretch forever, with nothing but sand, scrub brush, and the occasional rusted road sign. Her playlist had ended 20 minutes earlier, and she hadn't bothered to restart it. The silence of the desert pressed in on her, broken only by the steady hum of her tires on the asphalt. But then, her car began to sputter. The wheel shuddered beneath her hands, and the engine coughed before going completely silent. She guided the car to the shoulder and coasted to a stop. The desert swallowed her in an unsettling stillness. She tried the ignition. Nothing. Again, nothing. Her phone showed no signal. The first real pang of fear hit her chest. Minutes passed. Then, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, cutting across the darkening highway. A pickup truck slowed and rolled to a stop just behind her car. The driver got out. He was tall, dressed in a dusty jacket and jeans, and walked with a kind of confidence that put her on edge. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask many questions. He just said his truck was working fine, and he could give her a ride into town. Hesitant but realizing her options were limited, she accepted. Inside the truck, the air smelled faintly of gasoline and something older, harder to place. He didn't speak at first. The silence was unbearable. She found herself staring out the passenger window at the endless stretch of desert night. Then, without warning, the man broke the silence. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes catching hers for a second too long. "Funny," he said with a slight smile. "You're the exact image of my daughter." Her stomach tightened. Something about the way he said it, slow, deliberate, made the words feel heavier than they should have. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. "Oh, that's interesting. What's her name?" The man didn't answer. Instead, his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The road stretched on, but the air inside the truck felt suffocating. Finally, she asked, "What's your last name?" For the first time, his face shifted. His jaw clenched and his expression froze. He didn't blink. He just stared straight ahead. Then, suddenly, he turned his head toward her, slowly, unnervingly, his eyes locking onto hers. And without a word, he pressed harder on the gas. The truck roared forward, flying down the dark road at an alarming speed. Her pulse raced. She gripped the door handle, her breath shallow, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But just as suddenly as he sped up, he veered off onto another side road and left her sitting in stunned silence as the truck disappeared into the night. When she finally made it to safety hours later, she reported the strange encounter to a local station. Curious, she gave them the license plate number she had scribbled down in her panic. The officer checked the records. The plate didn't match any registered vehicle in the state. It didn't exist. To this day, she doesn't know who that man was or why he claimed she looked exactly like his daughter. A family of 4 was driving home late one night after visiting relatives. The highway was nearly empty, rain tapping steadily against the windshield as the wipers moved in a hypnotic rhythm. The road stretched endlessly, swallowed in darkness except for the pale glow of the headlights cutting through the storm. To break the silence, the father reached over and switched on the radio. At first, it was nothing but static, white noise that seemed louder than the rain outside. He adjusted the dial, scanning through stations. Still, only static. Then, suddenly, through the distortion came a voice. Soft, almost a whisper. "Help us, be careful, danger." The mother turned to him with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" The children stirred in the back seat, one of them whispering nervously, "What did it say?" The father tried to brush it off as interference. He turned the dial again, searching for music or a news station, but every channel was dead. Moments later, the voice returned. This time, clearer. And this time, it spoke numbers and letters. N, 1, 2, 7. The family exchanged uneasy glances. That was impossible, because just a few minutes earlier, a black sedan had passed them on the highway. And on its license plate were those exact characters, NX1-2-7. The father's grip tightened on the wheel. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. There it was again, the same black sedan, following them now, its headlights cutting sharply through the rain. What made it worse was the way its taillights flickered, on and off, in rhythm with the static-filled voice that still murmured faintly through their radio. The mother whispered, It's like it's talking to us." Panic surged. The father pressed down on the gas pedal. The car lurched forward, speeding down the slick road. The sedan stayed close, never gaining, never falling behind. Finally, in desperation, he swerved onto a narrow side road, splashing through puddles and hugging the curve until the sedan's headlights vanished behind the sheets of rain. They didn't stop until they reached the next town. The family pulled into the safety of a gas station, shaken and pale. The father, still rattled, wrote down the plate number, NX1-2-7, and when they later reported the strange encounter, the officer's reaction chilled them even further. That plate belonged to a car reported missing nearly 2 weeks earlier. The driver had never been found. The vehicle was presumed gone. But the family had seen it, heard it, followed by it, and what disturbed them most wasn't just the car, it was the way the radio had seemed to know. Even now, when they drive at night, they say they avoid turning on the radio at all, because they can't forget that voice, whispering through the static. "Help us, be careful, danger." A group of friends was on a late-night road trip when they decided to pull into a remote rest area just off the highway. The spot was quiet, surrounded by tall trees and the endless backdrop of the desert sky. With no one else in sight, they figured it was the perfect place to stretch their legs, set up a quick camp, and get some rest before continuing in the morning. They pitched their tents, started a small fire, and sat around laughing, telling stories, and pointing out constellations overhead. The night was calm, the kind of stillness that makes you feel both safe and vulnerable at the same time. Around midnight, they finally drifted off to sleep. But hours later, one of them, Ethan, woke up. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the sound of faint footsteps crunching outside, or maybe just an instinct. He sat up, listening. The night was silent. Slowly, he reached for his tent zipper and pulled it down, just enough to peek outside. What he saw froze him in place. The camp was empty. Completely empty. The fire was cold, burned down to ash. The cars were gone. The tents, all zipped shut, as if no one had ever been inside them. And the highway nearby stretched out under the moonlight with not a single vehicle in sight. Heart pounding, Ethan stepped out, calling his friends' names. No response. The silence was unbearable. Panicked, he ran toward where the cars had been parked, but stopped short. They weren't there. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. His only option was to retreat into his tent. He crawled back inside, locked the zipper shut, and sat in the dark, clutching his flashlight and whispering for help. The hours dragged on. Every sound outside seemed amplified, the wind brushing through the trees, the occasional snap of a twig, as if something unseen was circling. At dawn, Ethan finally dared to look outside again. And what he saw was even stranger than the night before. His friends were back. All of them. They were walking slowly down the side of the highway, dazed, their eyes unfocused, their steps unsteady. It was as if they were waking from a dream while still moving forward. When they finally reached the camp, none of them could explain what had happened. Each told the same story. They had woken up in the middle of the night, packed their things, and walked away without knowing why. They remembered every step, every action, but described it as though they were being guided, compelled, like puppets on strings. 2 full hours of their lives were missing. No one ever found out what they had been walking toward. The group made a silent agreement never to camp in that area again. And to this day, none of them speak about what happened that night, or what might have called them away from their tents, leading them into the dark.